Do you want me to introduce you?
Yeah, go on.
We all about there, everybody? Fantastic, lovely. Online, all connected and working, fabulous. So for the next of our discussions, I would like to introduce Mr. Andy Scott, who is going to enthrall us with his update on the revision of the BS5839-2013 Code of Practice for, what is it? Design, blah, 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 commissioning and maintenance of voice alarm systems. So with no further ado, Mr. Andy Scott.
Hi. Okay, well, as he says, I'm Andy Scott. I'm the chair of the committee responsible for 5839 Part 8, along with my good friend Mr. Smith here, who is one of the panel members. And he's here to, I'm just going to skip past that one because that's duplicated, that slide, I've just discovered. We've been involved in the revision of this standard. So just first of all, I thought I'd put a little bit of overview in about the process, because people get confused about British standards and European standards. So the fire alarm standards in the UK are dealt with by the BSI, who need your money to keep in business. So they're very keen that when we write standards that they're going to be able to sell them to you all over again. Members of committees, generally members of represent relevant organisations. So we've got PLAZA, the ISCVE, Fire Industry Association, the British Cables Association, lots of people, London Underground. They're all on the committee. They don't necessarily come, but they're on the committee. And we also, in the FSH 12 committee, we're also very good at co-opting people if they've got the right expertise. So, for instance, we're writing a standard for emergency voice communication products at the moment, and we've co-opted a couple of guys onto the committee who've got experience of radio systems. So it's not a closed shop.
Just a pause. Are you all right to swap to this mic? I think there's an issue with the...
Oh, well, it is microphone number 13.
Oh, there you go. Cheers.
Well, at least it's not number 13. Now it works. Excellent. Okay, so the point I was trying to make there is that it's not a closed shop. You're right, but you do either have to be sent by a relevant organisation or have particular expertise that we've not already got. European standards generally cover products, and regardless of Brexit or anything else, the UK is still a member of CEN, Committee European des Normes, which is not an EU organisation, although the EU does use ENs as part of its process. And they still apply in the UK. And the Secretariat of CEN TC72, which is the fire alarm standards, of which voice alarms is a subset, is held in the UK. So this is where I intended to insert the other slide, which was about the process we go through with the revision of British standards. This is done every 5 years. We look at the standards. So the last published version was in 2013. 5 years later, we looked at it and said, no, it's fine. But then back in 2021, we had a lot of comments from our friends at AMS Acoustics, plus some comments from the Fire Industry Association. So we looked at it again and said, yep, there's enough work to be done here to justify a revision. And the first change is, for some reason I really don't understand, we've changed the title and put Code of Practice at the end. Isn't that exciting? The scope, just the cut down version of the scope. It's systems connected to voice alarms. It doesn't actually cover systems that are connected to fire alarms. It doesn't actually cover systems that are not connected to fire alarms, although, of course, you could use it for guidance. We've introduced and modified some definitions, and this is mainly because either they were omitted originally or because we wanted to cover some particular technical points. So the first one, acoustically distinguishable area. Well, of course, an area is two-dimensional, and audio is three-dimensional, so we changed it to space. A really minor detail, but it made more sense. There was no definition of what an ambient noise sensing system is in the standard, so we describe it. Competent person, that's a definition that's gone in all the fire alarm standards, so we put the same definition in. We've introduced the word broadcast in a lot of the way we explain things in the standard to make it clear that that's what we're doing. It's not just a message or an announcement, we're actually broadcasting it. We didn't have a definition for an emergency microphone. I don't know how we missed that, but we didn't. But we did have a definition for emergency mode, and nobody knew what it meant. So we took it out. We didn't have a definition for a loudspeaker. We didn't sort of think we needed one, but one of the things that's changing in the world of fire detection is that there's at least one manufacturer trying to introduce a range of smoke detectors, which they reckon will also work as voice sounders with live speech. Quite. So what we've done here is we've not said you can't do that. If they can do that and make it intelligible, good luck to them, that's great. But what we have done is we've introduced some definitions to help us make it clear that whatever they do, it's got to work properly and be intelligible. So the definitions of loudspeaker and voice sounder together cover that point. In the existing standard, we talk about a simple acoustic space for doing acoustic design, loudspeaker designs, but we didn't have a definition for that either. So we filled that hole. And again, under intelligibility, we didn't have a definition for speech transmission index. The need for a VAS. The next clause where there's a change, it's down to the fire strategy prepared by the design of the building. We've taken out all the stuff about talking to the fire and rescue service. First of all, they're not interested. Secondly, they don't have any expertise to bring, and there's no legal responsibility on them at all. The responsibility for the design is just with the designer. We've got a section on types of system, V1 to V5. Just one minor change to make it clear that a V2 system, which is a system that can have any number of zones but has an all-call microphone, may also have 2 or 3 or 10 all-call microphones. I think that was just answering a question, a practical question some people had had on installations. Something that Mr. Smith's particularly concerned about is voice alarms and fire alarms interacting with emergency voice communication systems. Actually, I think I should be particularly interested in those as well, seeing as we also make them. And we're trying to make sure that you don't put a loudspeaker immediately above the emergency voice communication system. It's a difficult trade-off, to be honest, but we put some minimum levels in on, and then say basically keep it as low as you can in the area of the refuge. The reference to the purchaser in the exchange of information has gone out because the purchaser doesn't get involved. It's their consultants, their designers that get involved. But there is a strong push on bringing it to attention of the designers that they have to comply with the construction and CDM regulations. A lot of this these changes have been led by other fire alarm standards which have had similar changes, and it's just bringing things up to date with the legal landscape. This was a clause that was introduced as a result of a comment by our friend Peter Mapp, who observed that there's a lot of PA systems and sound systems that he's seeing where people will be able to access the system and make announcements via smartphones. And that's fine, as long as it complies with BSEN 5416, which of course it doesn't. We're not trying to stop technology. What we are trying to do is make sure that people don't imagine that things will work when they won't. There's a new clause about hyperacusis. This was as a result of a lady writing in, she wrote into the Fire Industry Association, the BSI, ISCVE as it was at the time, and several other organisations, saying that she and members of her family had a real problem in some of the railway stations in the London area because they could hear the monitoring tone and it hurt. Now, you did some tests, didn't you, Mr. Smith? And it actually is not, it's there. I can't hear above 8.125 kilohertz at a guess. But she could. I don't know how old she was, how old her family were, but she said she could hear it. And we did some investigations, and if there's enough monitoring tone voltage on the line, then it could be considered very loud. I did some Google research, and there are people who specialize in this subject. So basically, we haven't said you can't have a monitoring tone. We've just said keep it as low as you reasonably can. Measure it and make sure you've got it turned down as far as you reasonably can. I don't think we can make any other recommendations. There's a recommendation that, if you've got warning devices for the deaf and hard of hearing, so vibrating pillow pads, VADs, that sort of thing, they should be not just operate when the automatic alarm goes off, but also on manual emergency messages. Again, we talk about EVCS and interaction with the system there, and the same with the master station. So a little bit more meat on those bones about loudspeaker levels. There's a completely new clause on assistive listening systems, and it would be really nice to have that overarching assistive listening standards, because if we had it, we'd refer to it. So if you are writing that, or if we are writing that, should I say, let's put it in the standard. The next draft will be 5 years from now, so that gives you plenty of time. But we can certainly refer to it in this standard. Provision to silence or override other input signals on the assistive listening system. They don't need to comply with EN 5414 and 16. You won't find an assistive listening system manufacturer who's going to submit their products to those tests. They don't need standby batteries, etc., etc. They are a supplementary form of warning. However, they should be fault monitored. You need to know if they're not working at all. Having defined a simple acoustic space, we are able to say what you can do, and basically, even acoustic designers will still use the rule of thumb to design the loudspeakers in an office, in an open plan office. They'll still put one loudspeaker every, let's say, 6 meters, twice the ceiling height. That's absolutely fine as long as it works. So we give some guidance on the limits. We explain yet again, that the thing people call a fire dome on the back of a loudspeaker is very rarely a fire dome. And certainly in the context of 5839 Part 8, the sole purpose is to prevent things that might be melting in the ceiling above from falling on the terminals and damaging the interconnection with the next loudspeaker. So you can put a completely closed metal back on it, but if it's aluminium, I think that burns around, is it 200? 400 C. And a fire at the roof of a building goes around about 1,000 to 1,100 C, so it's not going to do anything anyway. However, if it is a fire barrier and you're putting a loudspeaker in it, which would be a strange thing to do, then you really do need to make sure it's properly protected. Again, we have one in red here that Mr. Smith's particularly concerned about, and which was that... Well, yes.
Because EN 5424 gives a minimum response for wall speakers, ceiling speakers are all of them.
Yeah.
And people were just submitting them with the equalisation in and then fitting them willy-nilly
Yes. So an extreme case of what Tony's talked about there is a horn loudspeaker that was designed to be very, very efficient at 1 kilohertz. And they want to certify it to EN5424, because otherwise they can't sell it for fire alarm use. So they have to take that peak out. So they take that peak out, they pass the test in EN5424, then they place it on the market. Nobody fits the filters. They just put it on the same circuit, or they filter everything else. They do fit the equalization, and they filter everything else in the same way and take the middle out. So I think that's a very important hole we've plugged, and certainly one you've come across an awful lot, I think. Voice sounders, the fire alarm people don't understand that a voice sounder needs to be effectively treated as a loudspeaker when you're going to work out its effectiveness, so you probably need 4 times as many of them. So we give some guidance on that. And, this is the key one. If a voice sounder is used as a voice alarm system, it needs to meet EN 54, 16, 24, and 4. So 16 for any control functions, 24 for acoustic functions, and 4 for power supply functions, depending what it actually is. A little bit in the commentary. Commentary is literally what it says. There are no recommendations in commentary, or at least there shouldn't be, and if there are, we should take them out. Or we can't have the word should in commentary. By the way, you'll notice I keep saying should and not shall. It's a code of practice, it's guidance. It's not black and white, it's not a specification, although they're often used that way. So we just point out it's a good idea to have a bit of spare capacity in your amplifiers. And that if you're using some kind of standby amplifier, hot swap, warm swap, whatever, and you're using signal processing, make sure that you've got the same signal processing when you swap it in. Emergency message generators. In 2008, EN5416 was published and defined how emergency message generators should work. So we finally got round to taking the requirements out of this standard and just saying, read EN5416. And in any case, you can't place it on the market if it hasn't passed EN5416 tests. A lot of people, when I was more heavily involved in voice alarms, a lot of people said, oh no, we don't want the word fire. That'll frighten people. Well, apparently now it's absolutely fine. We've been told to put the word fire in, so we tell you that it's absolutely fine. So at least if you're in a discussion with a specifier about the messages, you can say, well, the standard says it's absolutely fine, and that should truncate that discussion. Some other changes, emergency messages. A new paragraph about the sound levels of evacuating alert broadcasts, which is basically the alert broadcasts may not be that's as loud. Depends on the way they're being used. But test messages do need to be as loud, otherwise they're not testing the system. Measurements made with all the doors shut. Worst case, otherwise. Other than that, bed heads, where, of course, there's the new note about not putting the microphone in the corner. I had this. I went to a mock-up hotel bedroom, and the fire officers were there, and they said, measure the sound level. Measured it. That's great. Now, put it in the corner. And what's it like there? And I said, what? And they seriously had me measure the sound level right on the corner of the room, which... Well, if you had your head down there, you were either dead drunk or dead. I don't know which. So we make it clear you don't need to, which is also taken from 5839 Part 1. Some new stuff about signal-to-noise ratios, making sure that active noise cancellation doesn't prevent functional system testing. So if you've got a very clever system that filters out all the background noise and you feed a sine wave in it, make sure it doesn't feed the sine wave straight out again. If it does, you've got to make sure you find another way to test it. We heavily written the section on intelligibility. Peter Mapp has been on the panel, and he's in charge of the intelligibility standard 60268-16. And he's helped us to bring that section more up to date and make it more usable. We give more information on objective intelligibility. In the UK, we are not allowed by our masters to say you must have third-party assessment of the intelligibility. The assumption is it'll be okay if people walk around and go, yeah, that's okay. So we give some guidance on how to do that and how to cover the whole area. So basically, it's a cut-down version of doing proper steeper tests. A new clause on cybersecurity. This is going into all the standards at the moment. We don't say anything very startling. We haven't gone too far into it. Apart from anything else, these standards are altering all the time. So we've just kept it simple and to the obvious things. And it's taken a while. When did we start connecting systems? 97? So it's a good job it's happening. This is a typical backwards phrase. This is how we had to write it. It would be really nice if you've reported faults to the alarm receiving centre. That's what it says. We can't say you should fit an arc. Although I'm not quite sure why we can't say that. Maybe we'll question that. And then some more detail on testing. The main change being that the non-expert fire alarm company needs to at least be conversant with, can I hear it, and what's it saying? To try and close some of the holes in the maintenance side of these things. I'm convinced that a lot of fire alarm companies that bid for maintenance on voice alarms have never even heard of 5839 Part 8, let alone read it. We do what we can, but unless the government changes policy on maintaining anything, this is all we can do. A little note about batteries. When you put them in, manufacturers normally reckon 4 years life for a valve-regulated lead acid. Put the date on the battery. It also makes it easier to charge the customer if you can show that. And make sure the ambient noise sensing works. And then at 12 months, checking the standby power supply capacity, checking the ambient noise sensing properly, checking that the right messages come out in the right zones, always worth a go, that one. Measuring impedances to make sure that people haven't added or removed loudspeakers or retapped everything. And then, at the very least, doing a subjective intelligibility test and recording the results. And we've taken out the design criteria for public spaces in a hotel that was in the back, which I don't think anybody found useful. And we've, again, with Peter Mapp's help, got some design targets for different types of venues for emergency operation and some typical occupational noise levels. And we've simplified the battery calculation by introducing a new rule of thumb, which Mr. Smith here has proven, and Peter Mapp have proven to be effective, which is that there's an awful lot of silence in speech, even with the emergency, the alert signal. So you don't have to do all those complicated sums for battery calculations. He's smiling.
I like that. It was always a nightmare to work out the other way.
Does that include the pension drawings?
Yes, it's the whole thing.
What we did was we...
Tony, have you got his...
Yeah, we're nearly done anyway, so we can have a chat. And I'll probably say, when you ask me a question, I'll probably say, oh, I'm not sure, and ask him. So, because I'm...
Make sure he has a microphone then.
Oh, in that case, yes. Do you want to if you've got a microphone for this gentleman, please? So that's really good. I said we were near the end. It's not been published yet, but there are no more changes apart from editorial. So It's with the content developer from the BSI at the moment. He's finishing cross-referencing references to, I don't know, the wiring regs and things like that, making sure they're all up to date. Then it'll come back to me to read it and fix any grammatical things that I think I find. And then we publish it. There's nothing else to be done now, unless we spot a glaring mistake, in which case we may talk about it. Yeah? No, I don't think it'll happen that quickly. I've not had it.
February next year.
Yeah, I would think so. Any questions? Having got him a microphone, you need to make sure we ask him some questions.
We also need questions for the... Sorry, we also need a microphone for the question askers as well. So if we hold on. Majid, sir, have a microphone.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about your findings on the monitoring tone? So what kind of levels were there in the system that they were objecting to?
Right. What it was, a certain manufacturer sends out their voice alarm equipment with the monitoring tone set at 50 volts in the 100. So not only does it chew batteries, it cooks amplifiers, and it really, really affects the people who are sensitive to it.
And by the way, I have been in a meeting room held in the offices of this company, and I've measured it, and it really is there. It is. If I can find it, if I can find the file on my phone, I can show you.
Even with the ineffectual transmission of 20 kilohertz from ceiling speakers, it actually still comes through at quite a high level.
20 kilohertz.
20 kilohertz.
Yeah.
So do we have an SPL in the room that is a good guidance?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Because what we can't do is say you can't have it, because it's code of practice.
No, but you're saying there's an upper level beyond.
That's why we say try and keep it to a minimum.
Oh, I see.
When you try and turn that one down, you'll find the system stops working. But that's
Yes.
another problem, really.
I wonder if it, maybe more that you looked into it, whether you found some guidance that you felt that this problem occurs when it's above a certain sound pressure level in the room that would help us.
The
design
trouble
things
is, the
better.
lady who did the complaining,
Yeah.
who I tried to get back to,
That might have been-
I contacted her several times and say, look, we're doing something at
Okay.
last. No response.
Okay.
So
We don't know.
we don't know.
Okay.
But what I can say is when I did the measurement in this meeting room, it was there or thereabouts speech level.
Okay.
It was the same level as the conversation going on in the room inside a...
Signal to noise ratios is unnecessarily high, basically.
Yeah, it was really loud.
But the problem is, with that manufacturer's equipment, if you turn the tone level down, which you can do, it stops monitoring the lines.
Oh, right.
So,
Well,
So anyway,
maybe better
we've
detection
done what we
circuit.
can do in a code of practice.
Thank you.
so, and the other thing, while we're on about it, is the way we calculated the battery requirements. So, the low voltage directive and EMC directives use 1/8 power for the amplifier as the way of testing it. So, I've always used 20% as a rule of thumb because Peter Barnett said that at Windermere. And
Gosh, how old are you?
Must be true.
So what I did was I went to reproduce Peter's tests because we couldn't find them, Helen didn't have them and whatever. So in redefining the tests, what we did was put an amplifier on sine wave, put an amplifier with 10-second attention-grabbing tone, followed by the BSI evacuate message, and ran it for an hour, and measured the relative temperature increase in the two loads. And what actually it was 10%, not 20. So then Peter Mapp decided he would test by measuring the acoustic power as a percentage of the spectrum. And he got 10%. So we thought 12.5% gives us correlation with the EMC testing and continuity and a bit of spare breathing space.
And a convenient number of decibels.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly.
Good work, thank you. Valuable.
It's nice to see people nodding in the audience. It's always encouraging because it's not the most exciting subject.
Not at all.
You've got some questions?
Because you've
sir?
done
No,
the
it's
hard
not a
work
question.
for us.
There's just a note here that's come in from Peter Mapp saying there was an ISCE article and several papers, AES, etc., on ultrasonic monitoring.
I didn't ask Peter. Well,
I'm sure they're
I shall follow that one up. I'm always-
available somewhere.
Yeah, but it won't make any difference to this version of the standard anyway. And actually, I don't think it's our job to police these things too closely. At least we're making people aware of it. But I think the people with the problems also have to get involved as well and stand up. A bit like the hard of hearing people standing up
Yeah.
with assistive listening systems.
Well, I think it was actually, having done some time in voice alarm, I did notice the problems in assistive listening in terms of nobody actually knows how it works, nobody cares, nobody looks after it, blah, 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 all sound appallingly familiar in terms of, the things that the voice alarm is somewhere in a box, but nobody actually has ever tested it, checked it, maintained it, or anything. And it's just very often both things are considered to be grudge purchases in some way or another, and therefore relegated to the bottom of the pile when it comes to any continuing investment.
Yeah.
Same as the fire alarm. That's a grudge purchase. You have to have it because they won't let you open the building without it. But if you look at BS5939, it's very specific when you've got to have voice alarm. And the amount of people who don't put voice alarm in when you should have it is frightening.
And of course we are all preaching to the converted here to some extent, because the people who are trying to sell the voice sounders don't appear to be represented, particularly in the room. I don't know anybody.
No, I don't know. We make some very good voice sounders.
It's the ones who make the
But we
bad ones,
don't. But
aren't
we
you?
do know what they are and what they aren't,
Yeah.
and they have actually. Yeah, we know what they're for, and we don't oversell them.
Any further questions from within the room? Well, it's gone very smoothly. I expected
I was
it
gonna-
slightly more.
I was going to just make an observation. If Tony said that this edition is going to come out in February next year, because that would be nice, because that will be exactly to the month, 25th anniversary of the first edition.
We'll have a party.
There you go. I'm old enough to remember that one too.
Anything else on there? Okay. Is there any thought on single point of failure with regards to systems with single routers? I mean, I sort of imagine routers, they mean single voice alarm controllers.
I'm not sure what they mean.
I'm not sure what they mean.
I think what they're saying is, in an era where you have to have two loudspeaker lines and two amplifiers,
No, you
or,
don't.
whatever, but is it
that's
always
something
okay
that
to have
we've-
one
Okay,
voice
well,
alarm
a little bit of
controller?
history here. From the fire alarm point of view, a voice alarm system is a better form of fire alarm sounder. Instead of being a coded message, it actually tells you what it means. So it has to be intelligible. My mind's gone completely blank. What was the question?
Well, it's about no single point of failure.
Oh, single point of failure.
Yeah.
For a fire alarm, thanks, Majid. For a fire alarm system, even though fire alarm panels have 2 or maybe 4 sounder outputs, the requirement in a building with only one sounder circuit is that there is literally one wire goes all the way around the building. The second circuit is for the sounder next to the panel, and the logic is you're using fire-rated cable, it goes off, everybody hears it, everybody leaves the building. If the fire burns through the sounder circuit, then you're at a danger, you'll think the fire alarm has gone away. So you go back into the building and say, oh, it's stopped. But you know it hasn't stopped because it's still sounding on the alarm sounder next to you. As a minimum, a voice alarm is exactly the same. So if it's a one-zone system in a building, it could, from a compliance point of view, have just one loudspeaker circuit all the way up through the building. That is allowed.
As long as there's another sound,
As-
loudspeaker
Yeah.
circuit.
As long as there's a second circuit next to the fire panel saying this is still going off. That's what the rules are, and that's we have to follow the fire alarm rules, so that's what we say. Now, of course, most voice alarm systems have more than one loudspeaker circuit, emergency circuit, and therefore they automatically have a second circuit in the building that acts as a backup. However, even then, you don't need dual circuits per zone, because...
Failure of one amplifier will only remove the sound from one zone.
Thank you.
No, I think I suspect the question comes. There's a lot of specifications you see coming out internationally where this phrase "there shall be no single point of failure" is somehow inserted into that specification. I don't know where that originated from, and I don't see that it's necessarily totally related to the standard. But maybe it's something that has to be clarified. No, it's not part of EM.
It's not part of EM.
So we can't. Yeah. No, but it's just maybe that's a commentary item for 2028.
I think when you start to look at that, you're effectively talking about complete duplicate systems.
Yeah, like
and in nuclear
oil and
power
gas
stations,
or...
that's probably a good idea. But for voice alarm, bearing in mind this stuff is tested at great expense to make sure it's reliable and does what it says on the tin. I mean, my company, at the moment, we don't actually do voice alarm, but for fire alarm equipment, we have a wall we call the £1 Million wall. It's got 9 certificates on it. The new EVC standard, what we're reckoning, 50,000? 58, 60,000 for the product testing. That's what the sort of money we spend.
12,000 per voice alarm testing.
And we've got a smoke detector being tested at the moment that works on heat, smoke, carbon monoxide, talking sounder, visual alarm device, and that's coming in at the moment about 350,000 for the certificates. That's what we have to spend to be in this game.
If I'd realised years ago, I would have stepped up and standard testing.
There are lots of easier ways to make money.
It says that.
Can I add to this a little bit, or
We imagine. Go on. But then we're going to this last one. Then we're wrapping up.
I don't know if this helps. Yeah. I just wanted to say, there's a lot of papers on this by people who design high reliability systems, and quite often duplicating things isn't the best way of increasing reliability. You're better off putting that same money into making the one product more reliable. It's been proven over and over again by people who design this.
I think that's absolutely right. And when people run 2 cables in the same path around the building, and they've completely missed the point. And when people say, oh, well, I've got an office building, I'll take the A leg down these offices and the B leg down these offices, that's not particularly helping either, because if they lose an amplifier or a circuit, they've lost half the offices. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that one.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. Thank you very much, Tony.
And to my...
We're going to take 5, and then we're going to move on to our final presentation. So please don't drift off too far, because we're not going to go for too long.